everybody. Welcome to Cheddar Climate, the fight for change. I'm Hannah Doba.
And I'm Brad Smith. Thank you all so much for being here.
So great to see you, Brad. Each week on Cheddar Climate, we shed light on the critical initiatives aimed at addressing the climate crisis. Plus, we examine how it's transforming our lives and what we can do to be a part of the solution.
That's right. And on today's show, we'll take a deep dive into how a unified Congress and executive branch will impact President-elect Biden's climate agenda, plus why scientists say that a massive scale mobilization is necessary to fight the crisis.
And we'll talk to Dr. Michael Mann about his book, The New Climate War, the fight to take back our planet, and what he says billionaires Jeff Bezos and Bill Gates can do immediately that will make a major difference.
And finally, we'll talk to Virginie Helias, who is the Chief Sustainability Officer at Procter & Gamble, about the company's ambitious plan to save water and that mission and the unique exhibit that's at this year's all-virtual CES. Big show today, Hannah.
Big show today, but first, scientists are warning that climate change could soon render parts of the world uninhabitable. Amid this warning, 2020 came in at one of the hottest years on record, with devastating wildfires, a Siberian heat wave, an intense Atlantic hurricane season, and much more. 2021, however, marks the start of the Biden administration, and the soon-to-be president has already made significant promises to fight climate change. Joining us now, William Moomaw, Professor Emeritus at Tufts University and visiting scientist at the Woodwell Climate Research Center. Professor, welcome to the show. What potential do you think the U.S. has this year when it comes to fighting climate change?
Well, thank you for having me pleased to be able to share some of these ideas with you. There's a great potential for what can be done, in part because we've done so little, and we really do have to scale up rapidly. One of the things that I think worries scientists like me and many of my colleagues, and you'll hear from Michael Mann later on, is that the changes that we're seeing are accelerating far more rapidly than any of us ever anticipated. And I think the reason for that is that scientists didn't know about or weren't able to quantify the so-called feedbacks that are coming with the thawing Arctic, releasing huge amounts of carbon dioxide and methane into the atmosphere. And that's accelerating more rapidly than what you would expect from just our own direct emissions.
You've written extensively about 6 steps to mitigate climate change here, Professor. What are those, and how do you convince those skeptics, and there are a few out there, as you know, that believe climate change is a hoax?
Yes. Well, there are a lot of people who think that COVID is a hoax too, and they're dying by the thousands, hundreds of thousands. And I don't want to see that happen because of climate change. So the 6 steps that we put together after consulting with a lot of other colleagues are that first, we absolutely must stop putting more carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, and that's basically our energy system primarily. And so having zero carbon sources is hugely important. Secondly, there are short-lived pollutants that we could eliminate very rapidly, and because they are in the atmosphere for relatively short periods of time, we would see those effects very quickly. So what is that? Well, it's methane emissions from the oil and gas industry, from agriculture. It's black carbon, that's soot, which darkens the earth and causes it to absorb more heat. And it's leakages from some of our air conditioning systems that have very high heat trapping capacity, but they don't stay in the atmosphere all that long. So we really need to push on those really very fast. But reducing additions of heat trapping gases is only one half of the problem. The other thing we need to do is to accelerate the removal rates. You know, it's really quite remarkable that we put about 11 billion tons of carbon in the atmosphere as carbon dioxide and then the other gases. And yet the increase in carbon dioxide is only about 5 billion tons. And that's because the natural world is taking out a lot of the carbon. And that's primarily forests on land and the oceans, with forests being the largest. And so we need to actually increase that. And if we do that, we'll actually get to a point somewhere where nature is taking out more than we're putting in, and then we'll start drawing down the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, and the Earth can begin to cool. There are
Sure.
three more there are three
Yes.
more quick things. I'll just tick them off without explanation. One of those is, of course, our agriculture and food system. Another one is the economy, the way we have an economy where we reward destroying the planet and even subsidize it. And the final one is, in just about 2 years, we will have 8 billion people on the planet. And the planet cannot support so many people.
Yeah.
And there are benign ways of dealing with that.
You make so many great points, Professor. You know, on this show, we always discuss on what we can do, just everyday humans, Americans. Where are the biggest opportunities for Americans to address global warming?
There are quite a few of them. I'm speaking to you right now from a house that we moved into almost 14 years ago, which is a zero net energy house that operates with zero carbon emissions. And as you can see from my window, we're in cold country. I'm right up on the Vermont border in northwest Massachusetts. And temperatures do get down to 0 Fahrenheit here still, even with global warming. They used to get to -10 and -20, but they don't anymore. And we did that by building a house that has 12-inch thick walls. You can see the thickness of the wall behind me. Super insulation, everything in the house. We have all the modern conveniences, but they're all the most efficient we can get. And then we have solar panels. And we've actually, because this house was a model house that was engineered, we now know exactly what you have to do to meet these standards. So we can make buildings much more efficient. And even the little things you do will make a difference. More efficient appliances, better insulation, all of those things, and yes, light bulbs. Get those LED light bulbs if you already have them. You know, not the biggest thing you can do, but it's an important thing you can do.
You're right. Those little things help. And
Yes.
Professor, we have at my house we have solar panels as well, but our goal is to be like your house, where we're not emitting any carbon. So thank you for saying that, because that is a goal for us at my house at least.
Good.
I do want to talk about the Biden administration coming in January. What sort of climate pledges or any substantial action do you hope that this new incoming administration can take and will take?
Well, I think there's one major thing that they're really committed to, which is reducing the use of fossil fuels rapidly. You know, it was shocking when we did this report that we released. Well, actually, it was officially published in January of 2020. That, for example, subsidies for fossil fuels are have gone up since they peaked in 2010. They went down, hit bottom in 2016, and they've come more than halfway back up again in just it was just 2 years. We don't even have the data for 2019 and 2020 yet. Subsidizing polluting the planet is just a really foolish thing to do. What we ought to be doing is putting taxes on those emissions, making them more expensive, and using that money to effect the transition that we need to make to help those who cannot afford solar panels, for example, to have solar panels, to not be able, helping. We have a plan here in Massachusetts where we give subsidies for low-income people to pay for their heating oil.
Right.
Well, that's just money going up in smoke, literally, and into carbon dioxide. We ought to be paying to make people's houses more efficient so they don't need so much heating oil. That would be a much better investment, and it would help them because they would have to pay less to heat their homes. So.
Professor, thank you so much. We hope to have you back. I could talk to you for hours, but we are running out of time. We appreciate your insight. This perspective is so important. Professor William Moomaw, emeritus at Tufts University and visiting scientist at the Woodwell Climate Research Center. Professor, again, thank you for your time. Coming up, the scientist behind the new climate war shares the big takeaways from his new book and how we can make real progress against climate change in 2021. That's straight ahead. Welcome back to Cheddar Climate, the fight for change. Let's check in now on some of our top climate headlines. More controversy stemming from the White House. David Legates, a senior official at NOAA, appointed by President Trump. He's published papers online questioning the seriousness of climate change. While the papers were published on non-government websites and bear the imprint of the executive office of the president, they were not cleared or approved by the White House. Meanwhile, research company Rhodium Group is reporting that greenhouse gas emissions in the U.S. fell by over 10% in 2020. That's the largest drop in emissions in the post-World War II era. The drop is particularly noteworthy because it means the U.S. emissions would have dropped by over 21% since 2005, actually outperforming the pledge it made under the Copenhagen Climate Accord to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 17% in that 15-year span. A slowdown in economic activity and traveling due to the pandemic is the most likely cause for this drop. And finally, Uber is looking to expand its electric vehicles and hybrid rides to over 1,400 new cities. Riders in cities like Miami and New York City can now opt for the Green Trip option through its app, which the company says includes lower emissions rides. I love this. Drivers can also rent Uber's zero emissions cars through rental service Avis. That's starting now. Let's look at some of the headlines, Brad. I'll toss it over to you.
Well, a Biden administration and Democrat-controlled Senate, they are bringing new hopes for meaningful climate policy in the U.S., but that doesn't mean an easy end to the impacts of global warming. Joining us now is Michael Mann, who's the author of The New Climate War, The Fight to Take Back Our Planet. Michael, good to have you here with us on the day. What will you be watching out for from things like spending and stimulus as it correlates to climate and curbing climate change and an environmental policy from the incoming Biden administration?
Yeah, well, thanks very much. I do think there is reason to be cautiously optimistic that we will see meaningful climate action in the upcoming months. And that's because we have a chief executive in Joe Biden who campaigned on the climate issue. He's got a mandate to lead on climate. And indeed, as we've seen by the various nominations that he's made for cabinet positions and different agencies, that they're planning on an all-agency approach, really making sure that they incorporate climate action into every sector of their efforts. In addition, we have a Congress, which will be in Democratic hands. It will be a split Congress. And that means that it is difficult to envision the sort of wide-ranging, sweeping climate legislation that many of us might have hoped for, something, like the Green New Deal as described by Ed Markey and AOC. Instead, what I think we'll see is an environment where there will be room for consensus, sort of compromise climate legislation that'll include stimulus for green energy, for renewable energy, and we actually saw that in the stimulus package. So we saw Democrats and Republicans support those sorts of efforts, combined probably with some sort of carbon pricing. And we could envision Democrats joining with maybe a half dozen Republicans or so in passing that sort of legislation. So we need legislative action as well as executive action. We need to use all of the tools in the toolbox if we're going to tackle this problem.
And so what is it really going to take for more of those bipartisan overlaps, if you will, where there are these efforts? Because historically the GOP has not been as open to some of the policies that are environmentally focused and minded that the Democrats have continued to unveil during the campaigning, where we already know what each party's agenda has been. Where do you expect more of that reaching over the aisle to take place?
Yeah, so if you talk to some insiders in Washington, D.C., they'll tell you there are about a half dozen Republicans in the Senate who've been very quiet about this issue, but they quietly do support action. They just didn't see an environment where they could safely endorse climate action. So what has to change is the political environment, the political atmosphere, in a way that allows them to cross the aisle. One of the things that, of course, made that impossible was Mitch McConnell, was a Republican who in fact refused to bring any bills to the Senate floor if they involved, for example, climate and green energy, clean energy. Now, under Democratic leadership, we will see climate bills actually make it to the Senate floor. That's something we haven't seen in years. And in that environment, and with Joe Biden, who has a reputation for sort of reaching out to moderate conservatives, to finding some degree of consensus on matters like climate change, I think, again, we could actually see a climate bill not only brought to the Senate floor and voted on, but actually passed. And that's going to be critical because we can't solve this problem through executive actions alone. We need to massively incentivize the shift away from fossil fuels to
Sure.
renewable energy. And it's very difficult to do that without congressional action, without a climate bill or set of bills.
Michael, just while we have you as well, got to ask, you suggested that billionaires should focus less on gadgetry and more on government action. Why is that, and what do you expect from even private-public partnerships?
Yeah, so this is something I talk about in the new climate war. There are folks, Bill Gates among them, who are very bullish on sort of techno solutions, things like geoengineering, uh, sort of putting particulates into the stratosphere to block out some of the sunlight, to offset some of the global warming caused by carbon pollution, and other sort of untested schemes that are potentially dangerous if we were to actually implement them. So I think we need to look away from that. Bill Gates is also on record saying we need a miracle to solve this problem. And we don't. The miracle is already here. It's the sun, it's the wind, it's geothermal. We have the tools necessary to decarbonize our economy, and there is peer-reviewed research that demonstrates the path forward to doing that. It's simply a matter of putting in place the incentives that will make that happen. It's all about policy at this point.
Michael Mann, author of the new Climate War, The Fights to Take Our Planet Back. That book goes on sale today. There you're taking a look at the cover. Thanks so much, Michael, for the time. And everyone, coming up, P&G gives us an inside look at its all-virtual exhibit spotlighting sustainability at this year's all-virtual CES. Hi everyone, welcome back to Cheddar Climate, the fight for change. Procter & Gamble, P&G as you know them, is taking a new approach to sharing its sustainability efforts, unveiling a new Life Lab at this year's all-virtual Consumer Electronics Show. Earlier today, I sat down with Virginie Helias, who is the Chief Sustainability Officer at Procter & Gamble, to find out more about what P&G is bringing to CES. Take a look.
It's a total immersive experience. And what's great about CES this year is that we are very explicit about our sustainability innovation. We have a Life Lab, which showcases some of our most transformative innovation that tackle all our key focus areas of climate, water, and waste. And if you allow me, I can share a little bit about those. It's obviously much better when you go through the experience yourself, but I can talk about the 50-liter home experience.
Right.
The 50-liter home is basically about reinventing the innovation agenda on water for urban living. I don't know, Brad, if you know how much water you use every day. If you had a shower this morning, 10 minutes is 100 liters of water.
Wow.
And what we know is that the sustainable level of water is 50 liters per person per day. So you can't have that without technology, innovation that conserves water and that allow the water to be recycled in the home. And so this is what we are showcasing.
And so we've seen consumers becoming more invested in sustainability and choosing the companies that they buy from, the companies that they work with even. So how do you meet that demand at P&G?
Yes, we are seeing, and actually the pandemic has just accelerated the trends, that people are seeing now the tangible effects of climate change on their lives. You know, they are saying all over the world that their climate change impacts their daily lives. Like 98% of people in China, 82% in Europe, 76% in the US are saying, this is real, it impacts my daily life, and I want to do something about it. You know, 72% of people want to reduce their own footprint. And when you have a footprint, it starts in your home. You know, the water that you use, for instance, is the second highest source of greenhouse gas emission in your home. And obviously with P&G, whether you shave, you take a shower and wash your hair, you do your dishes, or you do your laundry, you are using heated water.
Certainly.
And so we have innovation that allows to reduce the amount of water that you use. You may have seen the Cascade campaign. You know, we are teaching people that it's actually better to run your dishwasher
Right.
if you have 8 dishes versus doing it by hand. You can save as much as 50% of water by just putting the dishes in your dishwasher with Cascade.
Wow.
So we have innovation that allows people to reduce their footprint right in their home.
And so, Virginie, as we think about the sustainability goals that companies, even like yours, set forth, how has that changed the way that you operate, even down to the product packaging that we know goes out the door?
It changes everything, from the, we made a commitment, for instance, on packaging to reduce by 50% our use of virgin petroleum plastic. What does that mean? It means that yes, we need to reduce the plastic we use. We even need to look at alternative material, like Secret in the US has launched an all-paper deodorant, for instance. We need to increase the amount of recycled plastic, which is a key issue because all the brands are kind of rushing to use recycled plastic and there is not enough. And so a technology like Woodwell, that is also part of CES this year, is an amazing technology that uses digital watermark, very small postage stamp size watermark that cover the whole surface of the packaging. And so when it's being scanned, the machine is able to say exactly which type of plastic it is. And so you increase the quality of the recycled material.
Certainly.
So that's one of the innovation that we showcase at CES this year.
Absolutely. And so while we're on that topic as well, further down the supply chain, have you encountered challenges holding even some of your production partners to those same sustainability standards? And if so, what are those conversations like when you're trying to ensure throughout the operation, not just in what P&G can control, but with your partners as well, making sure that you're producing a sustainable product from beginning to end?
Absolutely. Actually, there is very little thing that we can do alone. And whether it is the 50-liter home coalition, it is a coalition, which means that you have all the players across the entire water value chain, from people doing the infrastructure of water to people, like us, using the water through our brands. Same for plastic. We are the 50-liter, the Woodwell technology is also a coalition of our supply chain, like the Dow of this world, making the plastic, people like us, but also down the chain, people recycling the plastic. So we have to work that, with cross-sector partnership. This is the only way you can actually change the system.
And our thanks to Virginie Helias, who is the Chief Sustainability Officer at Procter & Gamble. Hannah, let me toss things on over to you.
Great interview, Brad. Leah, let's turn now to our climate hack of the week. Today, we're asking you to find the natural light now that many of us are working from home full-time due to the pandemic. Reconsider your workspace. Do you need to have a light on all day? Is there an alternative spot that might get better natural light? Turning a few lights off helps you reduce electricity usage and, of course, extend the life of your light bulbs. Don't take our advice, though. We want to hear from you. Let us know your climate hacks and how being a positive part of the change and what we can do. Send us your hacks to @Cheddar using the hashtag climate hack. And that does it for Cheddar's Climate, the fight for change. More Cheddar coming up next. Don't go anywhere.